Welcome to the Studio Success Formula Podcast, the business school for dance studio owners. And now for your host, Clint Salter.
Hey there, dance studio owners. It's Clint Salter here from Studio Success Formula and the Dance Studio Owners Association. And thank you again for joining us on what's going to be an awesome, informative, and I think inspiring interview today. Today's guest is an absolute legend in Australian television and film, and recently ventured into the world of something we know very well, musical theatre, where she was awarded the 2014 Helpman Award for Best Female Actor in a Supporting Role for Strictly Ballroom, which I saw, and it was amazing. A lot of fun, that show. As a NIDA graduate, she's also starred in films such as The Great Gatsby and Rogue, as well as some television roles in Steven Spielberg's The Pacific and Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, just to name a couple. And now she's drawing on her own experiences in the entertainment world to help performers to really navigate, I guess, through what can sometimes be a very challenging industry to hold a sustainable career in. And she's also an ambassador for the Foundation of Breast Cancer Care and went to school with my mother. Hello, Miss Heather Mitchell.
Hello, Clint. How are you?
Fantastic.
And I did go to school with his mother, and she's fantastic.
I'm going to make sure I send her a copy of this interview, Heather. Now, Heather, I'd love to for you to start by telling our audience of studio owners just a little bit about what you do today in your industry to help other artists to get the most from their day in their life.
Okay, look, I've been in the industry for nearly 40 years now as an actor. I've been in the industry for nearly 40 years, and I'm very aware that how fortunate I've been. I'm constantly grateful for the amount of, not success so much as just work that I have been given and that I've accepted, and the people that I've worked with. However, what I'm finding more and more fascinating, and I've always been fascinated by, is passion. And I'm really, really interested now at this time of my life in looking at what's driving people and the passion that it requires to sustain a career in this industry and even just to get work. And what really interests me is that when someone is driven by a passion or a calling, whether it's to be a performer, whether it's to be a teacher, whether it's someone even to be a mother or a father or whatever it is that you have a desire to do with your life, what comes often with that passion originally is a feeling, it's accompanied by a feeling of largesse or more energy, of great generosity, of effortless communication in a way, a sort of a feeling of boundlessness. And that drives the person off and on. And then, of course, what can happen when you're in an industry like ours is that you can lose that, the excitement. The passion remains, you know it's still there, but you can become out of touch with it, and often out of touch with it through praise and criticism. And often it's external forces mixed with internal forces of these things, which can confuse the person enormously and rob them not only of joy in their industry, but joy in their personal life as well. So the two sort of bleed into each other. And, of course, that's when great disappointments happen, when people with mental health issues become involved, and when people feel that what they loved is very fleeting. So the work that I'm sort of wanting to do, or the work that I am doing at the moment with not only performers but people who are non-performers as well, is sort of looking at their internal voices, if you like, and the external ones which they believe or that they are experiencing, looking at them, going back and trying to locate again what their passion is and why they feel it. And I'm basically using just really, I'm not a trainer. It's not therapy that I'm doing. I'm not looking back in the person's life and doing all that. It's working very much in the now and working with that person and trying to work out what's motivating them, how they can keep their passion alive, identify opportunities for them, as well as doing alongside that practical work, both on, voice work, breathing, presentation work, all sorts of things. So it's so enriching, and I'm loving it so much. But basically, I'm just using all the exercises, observations, things that I've learned over the years, and just using all of them. I've sat down and I've sort of just tried to really work out what it is that I have gained out of this industry, and just wanting to pass some of those things on. really, through exercises and practices.
I think it's great, and something as well that our studio owners, I think, would be able to identify with, because, you know, a lot of our studio owners themselves, you know, start their business because they're passionate about teaching dance and they love children, and then they start a business where they've got to deal with parents and they've got to learn about marketing and they've got to learn about finances, and sometimes it can seem quite overwhelming and they kind of go into a bit of a dip and they feel like they burn out and they lose their passion. I mean, how do you define passion? And I guess, what are some of the strategies that you've used with the people you've worked with or yourself to kind of realign with what the passion was in the first place, if they're kind of feeling a bit like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore?
I start with some of the most simple things. Firstly, I want to say absolutely that I feel that, you know, life is a complex thing. You know, when we start out, it's very simple and we just think we can follow our thing, but so many other things happen in life. And I think we're so fortunate. I mean, I'm thinking of your people who you're talking about, your teachers, who then have to go on and learn so many aspects of the business in order to keep their companies running, and how many conflicting things there are going on there. Many conflicting things, so it's hard to stay in touch with why you're doing it in the first place. And of course, then burnout can happen. So the things that I do is actually take the person back to look at using an actor's template in a way of the who, what, when, where, how, and why, which is when I approach any script. I look at what the author is wanting me to find in a script, what their story is about. I look at then how my character is involved in that. I look at what people say about my character, what I say about other people. Are these things true? I look at the obstacles which stand in the way of the person. So I go through a very practical method of looking at what the person, I apply that template to the individual. But more than that, work with the person individual, which is why I like doing one-on-one, because I do a number of exercises which I suppose involve meditation, which involve taking the person not back in a therapy sense, but back to the feelings that they originally were involved in, the feelings, getting a sense of that feeling, and then discovering where judgment came into it. So we do a number of exercises to being non-judgmental about yourself and about your situation. It's looking at, in a way, discovering what the voices are that you're perpetuating, and the fear that you may be unaware of that you are carrying with you. And they're the things which are stopping you from either maybe delegating work to someone else, maybe stopping you from being able to concentrate on actually the aspect of the work that you really love and handing things over to other people, finding inspiration again. So involving all your senses, basically. And I think anyone who's in a creative field, at some point, all their senses were involved quite acutely. So it's getting back to getting all the senses involved again. And the work that I found that I've been doing with people, it really affects. It's very simple work. None of it's new. It's just putting it in a different template, in a different format, and that it really starts bleeding into your everyday life. And there's some of them are practices which you do every 5 minutes for 1 second even. So it's just a way of starting to approach looking at things, literally physically looking at things differently, until things start, you're shifting your awareness, basically.
Makes sense. You talked about fear then, and I'd love to get your kind of perspective on fear, because I think fear can either be used two ways. It can be used for us not to reach our potential and go after what we want because we're fearful of the fact that XYZ might happen, which might not be great, you know, the outcome might not be great. Or we can really use it, which is how I try and use it, as a driver to say, well, if I don't take this action, I'm going to stay in the same spot. And if I do, you know, chances are I'm going to be somewhere else, which is for sure, and hopefully in a better spot. So how do you kind of approach fear and I guess coach people around overcoming, you know, fear of, you know, not getting the job, fear of not growing, you know, the business, fear of a relationship not going the way they want it to go?
Well, when you can identify fear as a protective mechanism that we've developed for ourselves, you know, there's the primitive fear, which is very much, you know, you run in case you're eaten by a mammoth or something. So fear, there's the very clear defined fear, which is there to protect us. But other fears which we create in our own minds, which then become part of our physical bodies as well, because they start triggering, emotional responses start triggering that the feeling of fear, I think are very become habitual responses to things that can be quite easily, when I say easily, it can take time, but through exercises of identifying the fear. Now, the idea of taking even a small step, let's say you've got a huge mountain to climb, just for a cliched example, but you can't just get to the top of that mountain. You have to take a small step. But even the smallest step, the smallest leap, if you like, requires action and creates action. So by not taking it, you're not going to get anywhere. So you need to identify, it's looking, when I'm working with someone, it's very much looking at what the voices are and where they've come from, whether they've come from an external source or whether they've created it themselves out of self-protection. And then I work with imagery work with the person, which is a silent imagery work, where they create, it's about, for me, which in my own experience is about creating an inner character for myself, if for want of a better word. It's like my inner mentor. And my inner mentor is an actual character which has come from me. And I can see this character. It is part of me. But this mentor is there when I feel fear rising, or when I feel I'm not good enough, or I think I can't possibly go for that, I'm not going to get that job. This inner mentor says to that inner voice, thank you so much for trying. It's not in so many words, it's just automatic, but thanks for trying to protect Heather from this. I know you're trying to protect her from something. It's not actually real. We turn you right down, and thanks very much, but she doesn't need you right now. So that's it, trying to spell it out, but it actually obviously isn't that clear cut. But it's literally helping the person develop for themselves a voice within themselves which is louder in a way than the voice that's stopping them from doing something.
So powerful. The other thing you talked about is conflict, which I think was really fascinating, because you're so right. As a studio owner, as a teacher, for anyone that's listening, they go into, they love teaching, they love being creative, and then they go and start running a business, and they've got to know all of these other things. And there's times where they're like, but I want to be creative and I want to run this class. But then on the other side, it's like, well, that class loses me money and it doesn't make me any money. And so they're constantly kind of battling between, I guess, the right and left side of their brain of like, I want to offer this class and I want to be able to do that and be fulfilled creatively. But then from a business perspective, it might not make much sense, or they might be losing money from doing something. How do you kind of approach someone who's in that role? And I know that it happens to performers as well. And I've talked to lots of performers who have started businesses and they're like, but I want to protect my work. And, I want this kind of, this routine or whatever to stay in the same thing. And I don't want someone else teaching it, but then it doesn't make sense commercially. So how do you kind of help people through that?
Well, I think that, of course, it's the common thing that happens for all of us. And that I think that, of course, the thing, if you feel that you have this pure passion for one particular thing and you don't want to taint it because you don't want to be turning it into a business which becomes commercial, it takes you too far away from what you're doing. I think really, I think that there's it's finding the room for all of it. And it comes down to what is more important for you. And I think that very rarely can actors make a living out of acting. So you need to satisfy the part of yourself that you can do the work which completely satisfies that, but accept completely that you're going to have to do other work and that there is no shame about that whatsoever. In terms of running a business, I mean, I've never run a business before, so I'm probably not an expert to speak about this, but I think opportunities lie everywhere, and it's about active listening in a way. And this might sound a bit unhelpful, but if you listen to understand and not listen to be heard, in doing that, sometimes you can find out things from other people and from things around you, even just things that you happen to hear during the day, things you happen to see, that will help you find a way to either expand into a different direction. It's about noticing, and I know the word mindfulness is everywhere. Everyone, it's sort of the catchphrase, but it is basically about that. It is becoming non-judgmental and mindful about the things that we see around us. And I have repeatedly found clues to things, solutions to problems, by simply stopping and looking without judging. And I say that in terms of even if you're running a business and you're having conflict in that, stop and listen. Ask the people around you, because you may find the people around you are dissatisfied as well, or that they're not getting what they want out of the business either. Even talk to your students. Find out what they most enjoy. And I think in the end, we need to keep being inspired. So if we're not feeling the inspiration coming easily, we do need to start actively engaging all of our senses, find relationships between objects even to find inspiration. I don't know if that makes sense really, but it's I just think sometimes if you can't find things within, if you're struggling, wonderment and looking out is the best way to find answers to things. Well, I think we spend too much time thinking, we overthink things, we struggle with problems, and sometimes it's very valuable, and I do a number of exercises with people to help them to start observing things more judgmentally, and amazingly things start evolving and solutions start occurring, even tiny ones, tiny solutions to things, because they're all around us really. We just have to, be aware of them.
I agree.
But that's easy to say, and it's very difficult when you're in the maelstrom and when you're in the middle of a financial situation and a financial difficulty. Of course, you have to do practical things to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
But so this is an adjunct thing. This is something to help you. It's a little more long term of shifting perceptions so that you try to avoid getting into that situation again.
Mm. Heather, I'd love to know, you've been acting, for many years, like you said. What led you to join a musical last year when you joined Strictly Ballroom?
It's so interesting. Some people say, "Oh, why did you decide to do that?" And I think, well, it certainly wasn't a decision, not a conscious decision, because as with I think most people in this industry, rarely are you deciding about things consciously. I mean, it's very rare that you're given two opportunities that conflict and you have to go, oh, which one will I do? It's usually that there's nothing else. And you go, wow, I'll take that. So, but in this case, that wasn't the case. However, when they rang me about Strictly Ballroom, my immediate response was, that'd be ridiculous. And then straight afterwards, I thought, wow, if they're willing to invite me into their room, boy, I've got nothing to lose, because I can't sing. And I am not a dancer. I love dancing, but I'm not a dancer. I thought, well, I have nothing to risk. I have nothing to lose. They're the ones who are wasting their time if I'm I'm not what they're looking for. So I just had fun. And I think that is the basis of doing well in any sort of interview or any sort of, you prepare. I definitely prepared, but you prepare and then you go in with nothing to lose. I didn't have the job yet, so I had nothing to lose. I think sometimes we go into into auditions thinking, I don't want to lose this. I really want this. It's got my name on it. I've got this good feeling about this. It's, none of those thoughts are really yours to have in a way, because it's not yours. So I very much continued. I did do singing lessons, and eventually Max Lambert, who was so wonderful, got me over the line. But I really just went in with the idea of just having fun, just going in there, and fun. To have fun requires being generous, I guess. So I went in with the attitude of, I will do anything that's asked of me. I have nothing to lose. And I was and as I went in there and I enjoyed it so much, I thought, well, they'd be mad not to use me, because they can see that I'm going to enjoy this so much. But what was interesting during that audition was afterwards I thought, that's how I felt. It was the same feeling as when I auditioned when I was 19 for NIDA. And I remember going into that audition with the same naivety. And I think it's often naivety which saves us. If you can go into something not knowing too much about it, I don't mean you don't prepare, you still must prepare. And when I say don't know much about it, it's not a threatening world, it's not a threatening place, because you're going in there to share something of yourself. And when I remember doing the night audition, it was the same feeling of I was not at all afraid, because I just thought, I'll just go in there and share who I am. I'll share what I've got. And I think that's the most you can really do when you go into an audition. You do your homework, you do the research, you do it's not that I didn't do that, but when the crunch comes, you kind of trust that that's all there, and you go in and you're present. Being present is the most important thing when you're in the room with other people.
And for our studio, our studio owners that are listening and are coaching their upcoming students who want a career in this industry, they talk a lot about preparing for auditions. And I think you just touched on some amazing points there. I mean, you've probably done a lot of auditions in your time. I mean, are there any other tips that you could give our studio owners? Because look, a lot of the time for a performer, like you just mentioned, most of the time it's not a decision. It's here's a job. Do you want it? Yes, I'll take it. But I think a lot of times though, people are going into these auditions like, well, this is like the last show that's going to be around, auditioning for the next 6 months. And if I don't get this, what am I going to be doing? And so there sometimes is this, they're in a place of desperation. And so how can we kind of coach our students, our talent around being present, around having fun, when there could be this kind of voice in the back of their head saying, well, if you don't get this, what's your advice around that?
Well, firstly, I really do believe if you have the longevity to stay in it and you keep working hard, there is room for everyone. I really do believe that. I also think that just because something feels like it's got your name on it and it feels fantastic, the chances of it being yours are very rare. And it doesn't mean that there's not something else coming up. I also think that the more you can feel generous for your fellow dancers, actors, performers, when they do get things, even as heartbroken as you feel, the more genuinely generous you can feel about that, the more that comes for you, the more that can come your way. It really helps you. It helps enormously not to, of course you feel demoralised, upset, hurt, all of those things, but it's, I think, very important to see it on a bigger picture, that the number of things that I have been rejected so many times. It's not, I think we tend to look at other performers and go, wow, their careers are amazing. They seem to get everything they go for. They've made great choices. And that's not the truth. It's not the truth. It's the way people like to be perceived, but that is not the truth. People go through long periods of time where they're not working, and during that time, that's the time to work on inspire yourself, keep yourself inspired, keep doing classes. I was so impressed with the Strictly Ballroom cast. Most of the people who are predominantly dancers and singers, they're actors as well, but mainly singers and dancers. Their incredible support of each other just blew me away, and genuinely so. They were very happy for each other when they went for auditions and someone else received it. While we were performing, they were doing acting classes. They were coming to me working on monologues, working on screen tests. They were widening their experience. They were seeing it as an ongoing journey. There is no such thing, I don't think, as a moment of success. It's not like you get that role. We all know the feeling of you go for an audition, you get the job, the high of getting it, and then sometimes the reality of doing it isn't as nearly as exciting as the high of having got it. So it's an industry full of highs and lows. I guess what we're all wanting is to get that job. We all want to do it for so many different reasons. There are so many assumptions about this industry that people are doing it because they love celebrity, they love fame, they love money, that's all rubbish. We know from when you're inside of it, that's not some people, that may be what's driving them, but not many. It's about learning and sharing and growing and all of those things. So I think in terms of your question for young actors and dancers in particular going for auditions, do your work. It's really about preparation and then trust and then letting go. Keep working with other people, doing the things you love, but prepare. I had a young girl I was working with the other day, and she came and she was auditioning for the VCA, and we worked together for a while, and she was doing really well on the pieces. And after a couple hours of work, she asked me about the devised piece, and I said, "What devised piece?" She said, "Do you think this is good as a devised piece?" And then she showed me the actual the piece of paper which had what she was supposed to prepare. and she had totally misread and misunderstood what was asked of her, and she hadn't devised a piece. So we spent the next 4 hours devising a piece, and I felt for her terribly because she'd misunderstood and misread what was intended, what the intention was. She ended up doing a great job. But the most important thing when you are sent for an audition for anything, make sure you understand what's being required of you. Do your research. If it requires ringing people and asking people, if it requires looking at material, if it requires, you don't want to go in if you're a dancer and go in not being aware exactly of whether it's a Disney production or what the production is that you're going for, if it's a musical or if it's a contemporary dance piece or whatever it is. Make sure you are across that. Then make sure that you're physically prepared, that you're mentally prepared, but also breath. I can't stress enough how important breathing is. That we can't actually, it's impossible to actually express an emotional state without breathing. Try crying without breathing. It's actually, it's virtually impossible. And one thing I notice so often is that people are not breathing. And if you go into an audition, make sure before you go in you breathe. And when you go in there, you're going in there to give. And if you go in there to give and you're not going in there thinking you're being judged, you sort of turn that round in your head, then whatever the result, as long as you walk out feeling you've done the best you can, in the end, it doesn't matter whether you get the high of getting the job or not. There will be something else. Because every time you go in there and do your best, those people have seen you. You've been seen and they've received something. So you go in there to give to those people and share what you've got. And then you stay in people's minds, whether you get the job or not.
I love it. And you just mentioned then, stay in people's minds. I think a lot of this industry is about building authentic, genuine, long-term relationships. And it's a conversation that I have with our studio owners all the time when their students are wanting to go and connect with choreographers or producers. And it really is like first impressions, make a big impact. And the industry is very small. No matter where you are in the world, you always end up running into the same people, or that person next to you in the audition ends up being a director of a show that you're then auditioning for, or vice versa. I mean, how crucial have the relationships that you've built in your 40-year career been to the success that you've had as an actor and performer?
Well, I've met some amazing people, and I would say that, when you work on anything, you develop very intense, very immediate relationships, sometimes intensely wonderful and sometimes intensely difficult. But either way, they're usually quite intense, working that closely with people. The extraordinary thing about this industry is that you can have these incredibly intense relationships. The job ends, you see the person every day, and then the job ends, and you can't believe that you're not seeing them every day. But they stay with you so completely that when you run into them even 10, 20, 30 years later, you pick up from where you left off. So we have amazing relationships. So they're the people who you really do connect with, you keep as your support people as well. And they are there. You use your intuition to know which people there you can call on when you need that support. And that support is very, very important. In terms of friendships, one thing I would say is that don't befriend anyone thinking they're going to give you a job. I think it's a trap. It's difficult. And yes, we see some people, we go, oh, wow, they keep getting that job because they're friends. Well, that friendship might have developed, if that's happened, because out of a mutual great respect for their craft or for what they do. And it probably developed because they had worked together, developed a very strong relationship and respect, and then continued to work together. But to actually befriend someone in the hope that you will get work from them is a dangerous thing and will lead, I think, to great disappointment often and a lot of confusion. So, that's a personal thing, but I would say that in terms of networking, in terms of being seen, obviously we've got so many devices now which allow us to network, and networking is amazing. But if you think of it more as being visible rather than networking, I think it's great to go places, to see shows, go to as much as you can, be seen, be there, And often when we come face to face with someone who may have rejected us at one point, not cast us, not done something, we get very stuck in our heads. We feel panic rise. We think, oh my God, what do they think of me? We become very self-focused. If we can try not to be self-focused, but breathe and put the focus on them, actually look at them, talk to them, speak to them, invite them in, that alone can do a lot of healing of any difficulties you may have had in the past with that person. So I think it's a big and a small community, this community of performing and teaching. It's a huge community, but it's really about getting in touch with what you have that is unique, that makes you uniquely you, and working with that and having faith that if you really trust that, work with that, encourage that and develop that there will be something will come along, or you will create something. That's the other thing. Always waiting for jobs is not always the answer. Sometimes it's very much about using your own inspiration and creating your own things. And obviously, great material leads to great work. Poor material often doesn't. So it's finding great material and even maybe taking the material to someone. I always say to people, keep looking for things. Look for material that you want to do, that would serve you well, and then go to someone who you respect and admire. What have you got to lose? Put it to them. Say, I really admire your work. People love to be told that you admire their work, and you never know, opportunities may come of that.
That is just fantastic. I'm like listening and I'm like, I want to talk to you for hours too. I want to be in that 4-hour session with you that girl had with you.
I know. Look, the thing with this girl, she was shocked when she found out, and she quickly went from being shocked and dismayed and what am I going to do, panicked, to going, yes, let's do this. And so she used every moment of that time we had together so brilliantly. So I applauded her, because she wasn't wasting a moment. So she saw an opportunity to turn something around. And that's what it's all about all the time, is turning a negative opportunity into a positive. And that's the other thing, that if you can, and it's really hard to see that everything that feels like a failure, everything that feels like a rejection is an opportunity to stop and assess and look, okay, what have I learned from this experience? It may be a tough lesson, it may be a great lesson. You may not respect the person who has given you that lesson. And even that, what does that say about the person who's rejected you? Maybe it's not something that you need to learn about yourself. Maybe it's what you need to learn is that sometimes there are people whose work you don't particularly respect. You went after it because you thought you should, but in fact, that's not what you're really interested in. So learn from each of those opportunities,
Yeah, completely. And I just want to finish off by asking you, what do you think, when you wake up every morning and you're going to auditions and you're working with people to help them be their best in this industry that, like I said, is a lot of the time can be quite challenging. What has made you the person you are today? What are those life lessons, maybe 3? What are those life lessons that you take into every day to, ensure that you're on track, that you're doing what you love, that your passion is fueled, that you're fulfilled? What are those things, whether it's from a teacher that told you many years ago, don't forget this and always live by this, what are those, values and rules that you kind of live by day to day?
Someone once said to me, who was an artist when I was very young, said to me, it's about unstinted giving. And she had covers, I think I was 12 at the time, and she was a visual artist. And she said, art is about unstinted giving. And that has really stuck with me. So, every day, I really do approach every day with, what can I give? What can I give today? I also am filled with gratitude. I have, as with most people who reach my age, been through all sorts of life, personal difficulties, from financial ones to health problems to dealing difficulties with children, with all sorts of things. And I keep being amazed in a way by how grateful I feel. And I think I feel such gratitude because each of these difficulties along the way, as difficult as they've been, I have kept getting in touch with that my inner mentor. So every day I try and I touch in with my inner mentor, which is the place in me which I know is there for me. And I think a lot of our difficulties, the things that we come up against each day, are because we are not allowing that, the voice, which is a protective voice within us, which when I say protective is there to help us, allow it to be heard. So I think each day I definitely, and my big thing is I want to have fun every day. I really want to have fun. I don't want to go over to a rehearsal and not have fun. I really think having fun, even in the most difficult circumstances, as hard as it is sometimes, but finding some humour. Take your work seriously, but not yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. And keep it messy. I don't try and keep everything. I try not to control everything that's going to happen. I like controlling things, but I try very hard. I fight against that quite a lot. Not controlling it. Let things be messy, and be aware always of the community that you're in a large community. So if you feel isolated ever, if you feel that you're alone, reach out to that community. It is a big community, and it's a wonderful community. And whether it's your teacher, whether it's someone in your class, whether it's someone you've met at waiting an audition, someone on Facebook, reach out. But beyond the telephone, I'm talking beyond the iPad and the computer. Actually, reach out and get face to face with someone. I think this is talked about a lot, but we don't do enough face to face really anymore. And get face to face with people and talk to people. So I think that's. Be aware that you're part of a community, get face-to-face with people, have fun, find something that inspires you each day, even one thing. Look at an object and find something, even if it's a teacup that's in front of you with a rose on it. Look at that teacup, wonder who painted it, whether it was mass-produced or whether it was individually painted. What inspired that person to do that? Did they have a passion for roses? Or was it a job they had to do? Just for a moment, sit and look at the teacup or whatever it is, and wonder about it. Keep wonderment in your thinking.
Heather, that's just gold. I'm sure our studio owners and the people listening have probably filled up about 8 pages of their notebook listening to you today. I really appreciate you sharing so many experiences, so much of the strategies that you use, that you pass on now to the people that you're helping. If our studio owners want to know more about you and the work that you're doing now, Heather, where can they find you? How can they reach out?
I've got a program called Acting It Out. It starts within you, which is sort of mentoring one-on-one with people to do with all these things we've discussed, but also even just very practical things to do with working on monologues, screen tests, things like that in a more practical sense, but it also includes this sort of work. And I'll send you, Clint, the phone number and the website.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for talking.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to speak with you, and I just really again appreciate you sharing so much on today's podcast.
Thanks so much, Clint.
Are you enjoying the Studio Success Formula podcast? Then we'd love for you to share the love. We want to help more dance studio owners become go-to studios, so we'd greatly appreciate you writing us a review on iTunes. For taking the time out to do so, every month, Clint will be selecting one lucky dance studio owner to receive a Power Business Coaching session. Simply visit the iTunes store today, search for Studio Success Formula, click on ratings and reviews, and then write your review. Thanks in advance. Take care, and we'll see you next time.